Okay, I'm going to begin explaining what I'm doing here with this board, which is based on the Raspberry Pi Pico RP2040, this processor. I'm showing something that I haven't seen before on YouTube, and that is a chassis for this particular board, which is called the Maker Pi RP2040 by Cytron company. Very inexpensive. What I'm pointing out here is these 4 holes allow you to build a robot car or a Rover and connect directly to these Lego Technic parts and use Lego Technic motors and Lego Technic wheels with the X hub, because the motor has an X axle. And these all fit together with pins, plastic pins, so it snaps together. We do not need to 3D print a chassis, and we don't need to cut a chassis out of wood or plastic. We can use this idea. I've got a roller ball on the front, 2 motors, and this vehicle drives. Right now, it's in the proof of concept stage. I don't have the batteries properly mounted. I don't have the wiring exactly correct. But notice that this board by Cytron has 2 motor driver ports, and those use PWM coding, and Cytron gives you the code that I just showed on how this car runs. It's these 4 holes that allow this board to fit onto these motors. The holes are the proper size, 5 millimeters, and then the proper spacing for these rectangles, these orange 5x7 rectangles. And I'll show you where to get all these parts. This is another Cytron product. Notice it does not have those same holes. This is a Yaboom product, and notice it does have the holes. So this board will fit on these orange 5x7s. We've used this with MakeCode and Microbit for years. Their board fits onto Lego beams or 5x7s, and then we can go ahead and build out. But this is showing that you can do it with a Raspberry Pi clone, Pico clone. Where do we get the parts? I'm going to start with this YouTube video. Scott Beasley does a great job designing a car. He's not using the motors and the chassis that we use. He's using what's recommended by Cytron company. These, what we call yellow TT motors, which have a different wheel, a different axle, different wheel hub. He's bought a roller ball that's on a bracket that's store-bought off the shelf and bolted it on to his wood chassis. That's the way that Cytron shows you building a Rover, as opposed to this way, which just uses snap-together, readily purchased parts. Okay, here is the programming for motors in MicroPython. Cytron, this is on GitHub. I'll put a link to this in the video. Cytron also gives you this coding in CircuitPython. If you want it, CircuitPython environment for editing, you can use that. If you want it in MicroPython, they've got all these different examples. This board, both of these boards come with CircuitPython firmware on them. In order to use MicroPython, there's a technique of installing MicroPython editor into the Raspberry Pi, and that can be explained. If you just do a search for that, you'll see how to do it. It's a simple matter of finding the MicroPython editor and dragging it onto the board after you put it in bootloader mode. Here's an example of the 5x7s, 5 holes by 7 holes. They're calling this a lift arm bracket or brick. This is on AliExpress. Here is the motor on AliExpress. There are 2 plugs on this motor. Notice it only has 2 wires. This is not a servo. It's not a 360 servo. It is a DC motor, 360-degree red geek servo gear motor is what it's called. You can use either one of these plugs. I've used both. This one I put an adapter on, so it goes from this motor port to a wire to the motor. This one is an example of the DuPont. This is JST, this is DuPont. Again, I just plugged in some wires and connected them to this port. You probably have to switch these wires around in order to get them correctly attached so that the wheels run in the correct direction based on your coding. Notice that when this is mounted, if you're going to do this project, you're going to need to put one motor in one configuration and the other motor in the opposite configuration, flipped upside down so that the axles are parallel. The axles are offset on the motors, I'll show you, and therefore they have to be flipped in order to be parallel to each other. They don't tell you that usually when you're building these kits. Here's an example of the wheels. There are many options on wheels. What you need to remember is the wheel needs to have this X hub in order to fit the red motor. You'll see in future videos when we're using servos, they also have this X hub, the ones that we use. Again, here's the website for the RP24 Maker, Simplifying Robotics. The code. There's a lot of code for this board. Here's a description of what the RP2040 is in terms of the microprocessor. So this is one way to build out a Rover car. We can extend, as a matter of fact, I will extend the chassis to the rear because the way this is set up right now, I don't have access to my port unless I take the wheel off my programming port. I have to take the wheel off in order to get a plug in here. So what I'm going to do is move these motors to the rear, and that way they won't be blocking that port. So there will be more about all this.